All right. Okay. I think you guys should be able to hear me now. I don't know if you can't hear me now. I don't know why you wouldn't be able to hear me. Um, all right. This is why I did this on a member stream and not an actual stream. It was set to some other random input. I don't know why. So, first time it was on me because the mic was actually muted. And then the second time it wasn't my fault. But I mean, it was my fault because I didn't check the settings. But anyway, thank you guys in the chat for hanging in with me there. I see you guys, Austin and Luke and Nico and four, aka Goldhorn. Austin, nobody wants to hear about how school has been and how my life has been. Everybody's just here for fantasy football content. I already wasted 3 minutes of everybody's time, so I'm not going to take too much time on this. But yes, my other job is going fine. Life is going fine. A little bit busy, but we got the lawn mowed. We did some team breakdowns, whatever. Played a little Silk Song. Made some trades. You know how it is. Probably sent out like 50 trade offers today. I got a couple done. All right. So today we are talking about several things. A lot of good questions in the Discord. Now that the sound is on, by the way, does it sound fine? Like as good as normal? Just curious compared to OBS if there's any difference. We got the lawn mowed. Is that a euphemism for getting Tet for nothing in a trade? It is not. I did both of those things today. I don't know about nothing, but certainly I thought it was a very good deal for me. I mean, the original deal was Olave and Kraft. So I had sent him an offer that was like, I was actually trying to sell Chuba Hubbard, and I was like, it was like Hubbard and some other assets packaged together for McMillan, and then he sends back this oh, I know what it was. It was AJ Brown. It was like AJ Brown and Chuba Hubbard for Tet McMillan and Jalen Warren, something like along those lines. And then he sends back a ridiculous counter, and I'm like, that must have been a joke. And he was like, yeah, it was a joke. I didn't think it would get accepted. And then I go back to him, and I was like, well, would you move McMillan at all? And he's like, well, what about Olave and Kraft? And at first I was like, just those two guys straight up? Like, I would definitely do that. But I decided to send him an offer that involved a little like Tony Pollard for Jalen Warren swap, like just getting a little bit greedy. And that worked out because he was like, I don't want Tony Pollard. And then we went back and forth on that a little bit. And then he just was like, what if we did Scatabo and like left Kraft out? So he sends basically it's Olave and Scatabo for McMillan and Warren, and then there's some other like pieces in there, like a third rounder and Marcus Mariota, whatever. So yeah, it really came together. So when people say like don't send that extra counter, don't try to squeeze out extra value. Sometimes you try to squeeze out the extra value and you end up with like a way better trade. So it happens. T-Hum, what's up, man? Welcome in. You guys are going to notice these little chat messages look a little bit better. It's nice because StreamYard just brings them right in, and I don't even have to do anything, which is very, very cool. Thank you, Austin. This shirt is from Old Navy, and I like it a lot. This member stream brought to you by Old Navy t-shirts. All right, we're going to go with Nico's question first. Nico Casso. That's Nico with a C, by the way, not the other Nikolai with the K. We got two Nikos in here. He asked, slow start for most rookie running backs. Is this expected? Any running backs to worry about beyond Caleb Johnson? So I'd say some of what we've seen so far from these running backs is predictable. Some of it certainly has been worse or slower than I anticipated. But we can run through these main rookie running backs, and I can try to assign like a panic level, I guess, and talk about like what I think is going on for these guys. Obviously, this is reflected in the rankings too. but just kind of talking through some of these situations. Austin saying I always have the toughest fits when you guys can literally only see from my shoulders up is cool. I guess he just has a lot of faith that the rest of the fit is matching. But all right, starting with Ashton Genty, easy one. You know, if we're talking panic meter, right, 1 to 10, from a dynasty lens, my panic level on Ashton Genty is like a 1. Like basically no panic on Ashton Genty. He looks great. I think he is great. I don't think there's anything about his game that's not translating. I think the Raiders have a bad offensive line. And that's enough for me to have like some level of panic because it's probably going to impact his near-term production at least a little bit, which is going to impact his dynasty value at least a little bit. But they're going to get him going. I think there's just going to be better days ahead. Like they're going to figure out how to get the ball in his hands. They've invested a ton in him. They're going to make the most of him. He can do whatever they want him to do. So not worried about Genty. I'd be buying him if anybody is actually panicked. I haven't really seen any Genty deals going down, like not in any of my leagues, at least. I haven't had anybody trying to buy him low for me either. So whatever. Like I think people kind of know that this isn't a big deal in Dynasty. With Hampton, if we put the panic meter out of 10 on Hampton, I'm probably at like a 3, maybe a 4. I've moved him, I did move him down a tiny bit. It's just some other assets that were ranked around him also kind of got moved down too. So I don't know. He had a pretty clear runway to start the season, right? And he did not seize that opportunity. But it's like I said in the video this week, Najee is not a legitimate obstacle to a good running back. So like we're kind of back to the same bet we've been on the whole time, which is Omarion Hampton good enough to make good on his draft capital? And like I don't think having 2 difficult games, one of which was against a really, really good run defense in the Chiefs, is enough to say no, he's not going to live up to it. Like, yes, I know there are people talking about his lack of lateral agility. That just feels like such a small knock where like as a running back, you can win in different ways, right? So if you can be good at, a handful of things, even if you have a weak point, you can still be a great fantasy football asset. Not every back is going to do every single thing perfectly. Like Bijan does not hit the big plays the same way that Jahmyr Gibbs does. Like he doesn't have that same type of top gear, the way, run away from the defense type of gear. He can still be the RB1 overall. So Hampton is still huge, big athlete, great athlete, very explosive. So he can catch the ball well. But yeah, some level of panic in the sense that he hasn't made the most of his opportunities so far. The team could slow play things now with Najee, mixing in. And this team just doesn't really throw to running backs that much. And I don't know if or when that's going to change. So I think that would be a concern as well as far as the ceiling. Interestingly, even though I do have Hampton ahead of Henderson, I'd say my panic level on Henderson is actually lower. It's like a 2. And it's just because I'm coming at these 2 guys from a different set of expectations, right? So with Henderson, it was never my expectation that he was going to be the featured guy right away. And it felt like maybe that was possible, in the preseason when he was doing so well and he was getting a lot of positive coach speak. But it was really never the expectation that he was just going to banish Ramondre Stevenson right away. So I'm not really panicked at all. And like I said in the video, this was a really strange game where he whiffed on some pass blocking reps. He got a holding penalty or 2. And the team was just like, all right, it's not his day. Like it's not his game. He's making rookie mistakes. We're just going to, live another day. We're going to play Ramondre. We're going to play Gibson a little bit. I don't think that this matters at all long-term. So like I'd be sending out a lot of offers for Henderson because people had lower priors on him than Hampton. And I think after a step back in week 2, there really could be some buying opportunities with him. I think even more so than Hampton. I could be wrong about that, but that's just my sort of temperature check on things because again, he didn't have the first round capital. He just wasn't quite as hyped, at that landing spot. So I'm not panicked at all on Henderson. I think he's going to be totally fine. Archie, happy Friday. Glad you can make it to the stream today. Mad Eye says, I'm not going to lie, I don't understand the general level of panic on Hampton. I've sent out some offers for Hampton in leagues. I haven't really gotten any interest at all, in trading him, not even counters really. So I don't know how real the panic is, or people like that have him are panicking, but also just holding on for dear life and hoping for the best. But yeah, I would say in general, if I'm leaning one way or the other, I'd say the panic is overblown. Carrie with an interesting question. Would you rather trade the 2026 102 or 2 mid to late firsts for Tet? Probably the 2 firsts. I think I would just, I don't know. I guess it depends on how mid versus late we're talking here, right? Like the odds that the 106 and the 111 are more valuable than the 102. It's kind of a coin flip. It's going to depend on the class, and I don't really have a lot of confidence in how this class is going to pan out. So, if you think there's a chance that one of those teams could make the play or miss the playoffs, or you've got a fragile looking team there with one of those picks, probability wise, I think you might just be better taking the 2 picks. But it also might depend on your league. Like, do you think you could take the 102 and package, trade that for a scarce asset more easily, if it's an active league, or maybe, tiering down to pick up more picks. So I think the answer is that those 2 packages or those 2 trade options are probably pretty close in value right now. And I don't know exactly which one I would pick. It would probably depend on what your team needs, what your league looks like, and all that. But, and I'm realizing I read this backwards because you're trading for Tet, not trading him away. And in that case, I guess everything I said about the 2 sides being about the same still applies. But I think here's what I'll say. I think if you already have a lot of pieces in place, like this seems like a rebuild situation. If you already have a lot of pieces in place and you don't have to fill a ton of holes, I'd probably trade the 2 picks. If you feel like you're going to be coming out of this rebuild and still kind of shallow next year, you probably want both of those first, so you can take 2 swings and just trade the 1 pick for Tet. Okay. Odds that Judkins passes Henderson or Hampton this week. I mean, for me, 0% chance. For other people, I don't know. It's possible, but I just don't think he's going to do enough. Like, he's on the Browns. Sampson is still involved. Ford is still involved. I just don't know how much Judkins can do in one game in this offense, with his role the way it projects to be right now. I don't know if I agree with this, that Hampton has a high likelihood of being a 1-2 turn type of pick. I think he could totally hang out like in the late second. I think it's extremely unlikely that Hampton can get to that point. Mainly just because of the other assets that are like in the conversation there. I don't think he's getting past the other 3 running backs that are ahead of him, or Amon-Ra or CD. I think we're going to see like Tet McMillan, possibly even Tyler Warren jump up there. I don't think that's likely really at all, but I don't think he's likely to plummet in value either. So, again, I'm still on board in general. What are we moving Wentz, Mariota, Browning for? I mean, Browning's in a different category than those other 2 because he's like a full season starter. And we also have a proof of concept that he can be fantasy friendly in that offense. Mariota is like sell for literally anything. The only exception is that I am playing this week. I'm facing a team in a league that has Jaden Daniels and no backup quarterback that he can play in a super flex. And he offered me a 4th rounder for Mariota. I think I would just rather him not have a quarterback this week than have Mariota. I don't know. Maybe that's stupid. Maybe I should just give him the player because, like, what are the odds that it really makes a difference in the matchup? But I don't know. I haven't done it yet. So. How was your Henderson trade? Walker and Dak for Henderson in a second. I think it's pretty good. It certainly looked like a great trade after week 1. Walker has recovered some value, but I would say that a second round pick is closer in value to Walker than Henderson is to Dak, and you got the best player in the trade. So I think, assuming your quarterback room can sustain that, I think totally reasonable trade. The next rookie running back here is RJ Harvey, and I think my panic level on Harvey is closer to a 4 or a 5 for a couple of reasons. Number one, RJ Harvey is already 24 years old. So when you look at like a Henderson or Hampton or Genty, they have plenty of time to figure this out. And like, even if this year doesn't live up to expectations, there is still plenty of time. With Harvey, his days are kind of numbered as far as gaining dynasty value is concerned. Like, we can't take a year or two to get up to speed with RJ Harvey. At that point, it's already over. He's not going to gain tremendous amounts of value, even if he does hit in 2026 or 2027. The whole point with Harvey and why I ranked him highly is because I thought he was likely to come in and just be the guy. And that hasn't happened. J.K. Dobbins is playing totally solid football right now. He is the designated goal line back. And now, and they have Tyler Bidet mixing in, which is totally screwing everything up. Like, Harvey would be a totally reasonable flex play at the least if he was just getting all the snaps that Tyler Bidet is getting. And it was just a 2-man backfield. We never, ever saw it coming that this would be a 3-man backfield. The beat reporters didn't say anything about that. So it's just really hard for me to know the timeline for Harvey. I don't think he's done anything wrong. I think when he's been on the field, he's looked good. He broke off the longest run we've seen from a Broncos running back in over 2 years in his first career game. But if he's not getting goal line work, if he's not getting that like 2-minute drill, receiving stuff because they want Tyler Bidet in there to pass block or whatever. And yeah, that is how you say his name. It's changed like 3 times, but that is the correct pronunciation. Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Like, he's moved in if you've noticed, he's moved in the rankings. I don't think I've like made an announcement about it because it's sort of just been gradual, but he's hanging out at the bottom of the late 1 tier. I would rather have Judkins over Harvey at this point. I'd rather have Walker. He's right there kind of with Harold Fannin. So the ceiling is still high. If Dobbins was to get hurt, right, which is still totally possible, the ceiling is very high. If Bidet they decide to just phase him out, things get a lot better. But that's why I'm not at like a 7 or an 8. I'm still at only like a 4 or 5 because there's still plenty of time in the season for this to pan out. And, if it takes a year and we go into next year, 25-year-old RJ Harvey, if he can be the starter, he's still going to be really good for fantasy if that happens in the future. And it's not like 25 is old. It's not old for a running back. It's just harder to gain a lot of value. Doesn't mean he can't be really useful though. So 4 or 5. I think it makes sense though to try to buy low in some spots. Like, if you don't need a running back right now, you have depth or something, like, he's a guy you could try to buy on the cheap. People might be panicking a lot more than we are. I think you could get him for a second and a little piece on top in some leagues, and that is a very intriguing investment at that price. My panic level on Caleb Johnson, on the other hand, is about an 8 or a 9. And this might have something to do with my like preconceived note, my priors on Caleb in this offense and what I expected and how I already didn't have a lot of excitement, but he's just not involved at all. Like, Harvey's playing 35% of the snaps and he's making plays. Every time Caleb touches the ball, bad things happen, and he almost never touches the ball in general. So he's like distant RB3 on his own team. The ceiling I never thought was very high to begin with. I have no idea if or when he's going to carve out any type of a role to even start proving himself and digging himself out of this hole that he seems to be in. He feels very much like a Trey Benson type of guy for this year, or like a Blake Corum, right? These are all also 3rd round picks. I feel like that's the type of season we're looking at here for Caleb. And then Quinshon Judkins, I mean, obviously, his slow start is like he wasn't active for week 1. He actually did get 10 carries in his first game. My panic level on Judkins is 0. I mean, I don't have any shares, as you guys know very well, but I think you have to be encouraged. If you have Judkins, you have to be encouraged that he got like 2 days of practice and immediately became the starter and was able to break off what was a very impressive 30-yard run in that game. But He still plays on the Browns. It's still a committee backfield. I don't think Dylan Sampson is going to go away entirely. I don't think there's a ton of fantasy upside here with Judkins. So am I panicking? No. Am I super, over the moon excited about what Judkins is going to do this year? Also, no. And the last rookie running back, and then we'll move on. Bashal Tutin, my panic level, -5, -5 panic level. We should be thrilled. He's had one of the best runouts so far for any of the rookie running backs. He just, he just looks awesome on the field. The team is talking about him very highly. Sky's the limit for Bashal Tutin. So that was a good question. The next question was from Doc Birdie, who I keep thinking is Clanger because his name is Clanger34 Fan Club, which is very confusing to me. But he asked, who are some players that are not being talked about enough? And I don't exactly know how to answer that because I don't know who everyone's talking about. I don't consume quite enough content. Like I go to the guys that I like and I see what they're talking about, but otherwise I don't really know like what people are out there talking about. So what I took this as, or how I decided to answer this question, is some guys that I think are good buys that I didn't talk about in the video this week. So I'm kind of just ignoring the question and turning it into my own question. I don't know if Ellick is a guy that's not being, like, again, is Ellick not being talked about enough? Or because like I talked about him in my video, that he was a big rankings riser for me after week 1. Is no one else talking about him? I don't know. I would assume people were talking about him. So I'm just not sure. I do. Yeah. I mean, I think you have to like what we're seeing from Ellick as far as the immediate role, getting the targets. But yeah, so some extra buys this week. Guys that I'd be sending out offers for, if my team was in a spot where this made sense. Cam Scatabo is a guy I almost put in the video, and I didn't have enough time to write up everybody, and I decided to cut him. But I think he's a really good buy. He would be a better buy if there weren't so many fanatics that already had him rostered in so many leagues. Like at least 75% of my leagues has like a Cam Scatabo guy that just already has him. And so in theory, he should be a nice buy low because he hadn't done anything and now he's back and he's like maybe taking over the backfield. But I don't know how actionable it is because again, he's just very tightly held by a lot of managers. But I do think he is worthy of early second round type of value at this point. What we saw from him last week was really impressive. He looked good, but more importantly, he just got so much work, and I didn't think it was going to be so fast that he wrestled the backfield away from Tracy. I will say, apparently Tracy made some comments about the play calling, and I think that he was being punished. They gave Devin Singletary the first snap, which I thought was really, really strange. But when I found out, I was watching the Underdog guys do their stats versus film. They were talking about how Tracy like made some comment about the play calling. The fact that they gave Singletary the first snap feels like it was disciplinary to some degree. But Scatabo's he's got the passing game upside. He's got the goal line role for the Giants. So it's still not that lucrative because number one, they've actually been very pass heavy in neutral situations. And they're also not a very good offense. Their offensive line's not that great. But Andrew Thomas will be back. And he's, his role can still grow. So we don't know how good Dart is. If Dart's really good, then that raises the ceiling for the offense. So I do like Scatabo as a buy. If you can send, obviously we're not sending firsts. If you can send like a second and a player that's maybe a fading type of player, like a Pacheco or something, second plus Pacheco for Scatabo, I think is a very reasonable type of deal. Next guy would be Jacoby Myers, who I was reminded today I needed to move up a little bit, and I did. I struggle to get Myers into early second round type range because I just don't think the ceiling is that high. And he's like 20, almost 29, maybe something like that. So it's like, he's just a very rock solid player that's useful. Not a buy in all situations, but if you're in like a 3 wide receiver league, he is really, really handy to have. You can start him every week. He's had a really high target share so far. Some of that's probably helped by Bowers being in and out a bit, but you can pretty much lock in, 25% targets at least for Myers. the Raiders have been more pass heavy than people were maybe expecting. And he's just good, he's just a little bit underrated. So love Jakobi Meyers as a perpetual. He's like the James Conner of wide receivers, I feel like maybe is a fair assessment. Chris Olave, not under discussed in our Discord, that's for sure. We talk about Olave plenty. I couldn't put him in the video this week because I've talked about him too many times, but man, he has a very fantasy friendly role right now. He's being used more in like pre-snap motion, and I think he's been mixing into the slot a bit, and just 22 targets through 2 games. I think that this team, so I think the Saints are like the better version of the Jameis Winston, Jerry Jeudy, David Njoku Browns last year with Spencer Rattler, Chris Olave, and Juwan Johnson. I think it's just a better version of that, like across the board. I think Rattler, I have no idea if this guy's any good, but he's like, again, he's like Winston in the sense that he's just going to chuck it. He's like totally fearless and just, high variance, plays a fun brand of football. And that is beneficial to the weapons. And we're seeing it with Juwan. We're seeing it with Olave, even Shaheed to an extent. But yeah, I think really good days are coming for Olave. Are you worried that Bowers will not live up to his first round cost? I mean, I'm not really worried about him right now. Like, let's give him another week to get healthy. Everything in week 1 looked awesome. Like, people were freaking out about the snaps, but he had an insanely high targets per out run. He had ended up with a very high target share overall. If they're going to tailor his usage such that he's getting the ball almost every time he's on the field, I don't think it really is a huge deal that he was playing fewer snaps. Week 2 wasn't as good, but also it was a total blow up game for the Raiders. Like, Geno played his worst game in years. The Chargers clearly just had their number, and Bowers was coming off that injury. We didn't know if he's going to play. So I'm not really worried about Bowers at all yet. Again, willing to give this a couple more weeks, let him get healthy. Obviously, it sucks if you took him and he picks up this injury. You can't really predict that. I think a healthy Bowers is still totally capable of paying off that price. It's tough in like redraft formats where, and I think you're talking about dynasty here because he wasn't going first round in redraft, but like in redraft formats, if you could just wait and take Juwan Johnson late, or you get him off waivers, or you took, I don't know, you have like Tucker Kraft, assuming he get healthy. Yeah, it sucks in that format because you foregoed. That's not a word. You passed on a first round pick that you could have had otherwise. In Dynasty, it's different because you can make these trades to get multiple high-end players. What about Wan'Dale? I had Wan'Dale on my list, Max, down at the bottom. I think you have to like what you saw. Like, if we back up with Wan'Dale, he was actually a really good college prospect who had great production, went in the second round. People kind of were a little dismissive because of his size. And then he gets kind of banished on these like terrible teams for years, but has always earned volume, just at a very low ADOT, like you said. Now he's getting these higher ADOT looks. There were a couple busted coverages in that game, I believe, from what I heard from Hayden Winks. And the Cowboys defense is truly awful. So, what we saw last week was not sustainable at all, but it doesn't have to be for him to be a big value. I'd happily send a third round pick for Wan'Dale if you're in trouble for wide receivers. I think he's going to be a flex worthy type of player all season, unless Dart comes in as like a total disaster, but otherwise probably very usable. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. And I tried this in a couple leagues and it didn't work, but if you could send away like I'm fine flipping like a Mark Andrews type of guy for him. If you're ready to just like move on, I wouldn't blame you whatsoever. I think to some extent it's kind of maybe a little bit of a mirage, but I just don't know how much. Somewhere in that same value range, though, I would throw out Dontavian Wicks as well. who was playing in the slot a bit after Jaden Reed got hurt, could be a big beneficiary if they continue to use Matthew Golden in this like sacrificial wide receiver type of role where he's just running these clear outs all the time, which they probably won't do. They'll probably try to get him more involved, but that type of usage for Golden is just really good for the other wide receivers because it opens up space. And Wicks is good. He's always been good. He's always been really good at getting open and not just not catching the ball. He's been catching the ball this year. The fact that they're still willing to go back to him after, how poorly he played last year is very, very encouraging. So just another wide receiver hanging out in that like third round range. If you want to take a shot, Reed's going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks. Wicks could get up to like a 60-70% route share. Could be interesting. And then the other buys I have are actually all tight ends. I've got 4 tight ends here. So one would be Harold Fannin, who we've already talked about. But if there's maybe a little bit of like post-hype opportunity here after he came back down to earth a bit in week 2, at the end of the day, a lot of people are still going to look at him and say he's, a backup tight end on the Browns. And I think maybe people will think, why was I so excited about Harold Fannin, and look for an opportunity to unload him. I don't know if that's the case. I just know there's a lot of different types of leagues out there with a lot of different types of managers. I thought I would throw it out there. Maybe you could circle back and check in with the Harold Fannin manager, because I'm still very excited about him. I didn't see anything in week 2 that made me like, back off of my stance on Fannin being a very good football player and a good dynasty asset. Tucker Kraft as well, with the little injury he's got. He's probably going to miss a couple of weeks. Maybe that's enough time for people to forget what kind of a breakout we were looking at. Maybe he comes back and has a bad game after the injury, and that's when you can buy. But just another opportunity where you want to maybe look into the Tucker Kraft opportunities that are out there. If you have a tight end that's playing right now that you can get in somebody's lineup, maybe you can pick up some value that way. Arteta and an early second enough for London when tearing down as a rebuild? Yeah, I think so. I've got no issue with that. Yeah, they're playing a ton of 12 personnel in Cleveland, and they're even letting Fannin play some of the early downs too in 11 personnel. So yeah, I'm not worried about Fannin at all. I can't believe I'm saying this, guys. Kyle Pitts, I hate saying it because I sold all my shares. I thought it was over, totally over, and it's just not totally over yet. Kyle Pitts ran all the routes last week. He's being used more in motion. He's being used as like a first read target, which almost never happened last year. He's basically dusted Ray McLeod. He's getting a lot more of that. Like, they ran 12 personnel at the highest rate in the league last week. They barely ran 12 personnel last year. They were very high 11 personnel team last year. They're running all this 12 because they want Charlie Warner on the field to block, but they still want Pitts on the field to catch passes. He does look better. That's what I'm being told. And I mean, he looked decent in that Vikings game for what I was able to watch. I don't know what he costs right now. Probably more than I want to pay, because the usage is still not like breakout, crazy breakout. But like, I thought he was going to be borderline useless this year because I didn't think he was going to get on the field for that many snaps. I didn't think he was going to be a featured first read, scheme touches type of guy, because he wasn't last year. And I thought, if he wasn't healthy last year, when is it going to happen? But apparently getting out on the golf course with Michael Penix has really reinvigorated his health, because again, the role has been good. So, whatever. I don't care. I don't mind sending out a second in a tight end premium league. Maybe that doesn't get it done, but I'd throw it out there. And then Jake Ferguson is actually getting kind of crazy usage. He's one of the highest tight ends in expected points per game right now. The Cowboys are throwing to tight ends a lot. They're just throwing a lot in general. We look at the current setup here for the Cowboys pass catchers through 2 games. Jake Ferguson is looking at a 20.9% target share. That's quite high for a tight end. He already has 14 receptions in 2 games. We're looking at, in tight end premium scoring, 15.1 expected points per game. That is very solid. Very, very solid. Now, he has scored 15.6 tight end premium points per game. If somebody is starting Jake Ferguson right now, they're probably not eager to trade him to you. But just throwing it out there as a guy that I haven't heard discussed very much, he seems like a very usable tight end all season. So, whatever. And then 2 maybe under discussed players as far as sells. And then we'll get on to the rest of these questions. I'm going to kind of try to rapid fire them because as much as Austin wants me to do a 2-hour show, I do not want to do a 2-hour show. No offense. I love you guys, but it's been a long day. Not enough concern, I think, from the general community. Obviously, these are 2 guys I've talked about. They're 2 guys that I think as a community we're lower on, but Kyren Williams is kind of like not over, but like the Kyren Williams ceiling is in major, major jeopardy right now after Blake Corum played more snaps not more snaps than him, but he played more snaps than he has played and got a 4th quarter touchdown. And Sean McVay was asked about this, if he wants to use the backs this way, basically getting Corum like 35% of the work and Kyren the other 65%. And he said, yes, that's what I want to do. That's a big change from what we've seen from Kyren in the past, where he led the league in opportunities, led the league in snaps. That I talked about this multiple times and people like roasted me when he got the extension. What I said was there was a ton of fragility with Kyren because he needs all of the touches. And if they just decide to reduce his playing time by like 2 or 3 drives a game, sometimes those drives are going to be the ones they score on, and he needs those touchdowns. Otherwise, he's just like fancy James Conner. He's just like 13, 14 points per game. Could even be outscored, could be outscored by James Conner. So he's still going to have his games where he scores 2 touchdowns, but he doesn't catch passes. And now he's not going to get a total lock on every single drive. I only have Kyren in 1 league and I already couldn't sell him in that league. So I'm not worried about Kyren because I don't have him. But you should be worried if you have him. Like, I think that this is meaningful. I think there's been a change. I think there's been a change in the usage, and the coach has confirmed it. I mean, he could be lying, but they drafted him in the 3rd round probably for a reason. He has played well when given the opportunity, like well enough. Not playing himself out of a job. It's not like Kyren is playing out of his mind either. So it never made sense for Kyren to be the highest volume running back in the NFL, and it seems like he's not anymore. So, yeah, if you have him, I'd still be looking to sell before people catch on to this personally. Like, you can see where I have him. If you have rankings, if you're a superstar hire, you have the rankings, you know where I have him. He's outside my 1st round. I'd rather have Kenneth Walker personally. Obviously, I'd rather have James Cook at this point. That ship has sailed. I'd rather have Jacobs. I'd rather have like Jalen Waddle. I'd rather have Jordan Addison, Devonta Smith. Like, I'm out on that. And then the other guy is Jameson Williams. Again, I've been lower on him. The community has been out of their minds on Jameson Williams. We've seen it come to fruition now in 2 games. I don't care. I really don't care that he caught 2 passes for 108 yards and a touchdown. I have seen Marquez Valdes-Scantling do that on a dozen occasions. The key here is that he's had like a 13.5% target share in back-to-back games. I just don't know how you can be the Jameson Williams truthers who are like, the team's talking up Jameson. This is going to be his big leap. He's going to make his big leap because his 1st year didn't count. So this is actually year 3. And he's like, he just keeps getting better, man. He's going to be used in all these different ways. Like, he's not. He hasn't been. It's still all about Amon-Ra St. Brown in the passing game. Sam Laporta had a big game in week 1. Jahmyr Gibbs is getting more receiving work. Like, the math never added up for all of these guys to have the target shares that people wanted them to have. Jameson Williams does not have the target share. In best ball leagues, go crazy. He's going to have some big games. In managed, I think it's going to be really frustrating to start him because this type of target share is not going to work. And I think he'll settle in probably higher than 13%, but we're not seeing a leap that people thought we were going to see. That was totally priced into him. He was priced in to have a leap this year because based on what he did last year, there was no reason for him to be drafted as high as he was being drafted. We've seen that target share come in low in 2 consecutive games. I'm sure he'll have his weeks, like I said, but we're not seeing a leap. We're not seeing Amon-Ra St. Brown take a step back at all. We're actually seeing Gibbs be one to get more passing game work this year, which is just taking pass attempts away that could be going to Jameson. And now there's Isaac TeSlaa, banging on the door. He went from 8% to like 29% of the snaps. He's probably a better target earner than Khalif Raymond. So that's not good if you're Jameson Williams, especially when TeSlaa can also stretch the field. So I haven't wanted any part of Jameson Williams in Dynasty, and I still don't, personally. But yeah, those are my guys as far as some extra buys and sells for the week. And we've got a handful of questions left here from the member stream channel. So I guess just want to throw it out there really quickly. If you're watching this on YouTube, but you don't go on the Discord much, or you're not in the Discord, make sure you're checking that out. Get synced up to the Discord, go into the member stream channel where you can ask these questions. Every week I'll tag everybody and just say, you have questions for the stream. You can throw questions in there and I'll get to as many as I can, which usually is all of them. So my rule asked 2026 draft picks versus 2027. How much do we sway valuations based on the alleged draft class quality gap? So for the most part, I'm just not doing this at all. I don't scout the classes really ahead of time. I'm not going to know the 2026 class until January. And, I hope that's not something that's concerning to you guys. I can't budget my time differently that would just hurt my actual dynasty analysis to go and try to scout the classes ahead of time. So I don't do it. I know some of the names, but I don't really keep tabs on all of it. And I've heard from people at 2026, oh, it's not that good. 2027 is crazy. Every year we hear this type of stuff. 2025 wasn't going to be good either, and it ended up being awesome. And people are going to emerge in 2026, and people are going to find ways to get excited, especially in Superflex, because I do know one thing, that there are quarterbacks. But I think this stuff kind of just all comes out in the wash, and we can kind of outsmart ourselves when the simple heuristic is picks gain value, and they gain tons of value right up until the time of the draft. So I think 2026 picks pretty much across the board are going to be more valuable than 2027 picks in March, in April. And if they aren't, they probably should be. You should be taking these rookies because the rookies are going to have a chance to gain exponential value. That being said, I love adding 2027 picks, and I think that class probably is better than 2026. I just don't know for sure, and I think it's silly to stake a lot of our choices on that, especially because if you're pushing all of your assets back, you're probably just pushing back your window to contend a little bit too. And that's going to cost you money. It's going to cost you buy-ins. And is the relative difference in the class strength enough to make up for that? Probably not. And, look at Arch Manning, right? Arch Manning is supposed to be the headlining option, one of the headlining options of potentially the 2027 class. Maybe this class if he declared, but I think it was pretty much always expected that he would go back to school. Now, does he matter at all? Is he even in play? That takes a player right out of the top of the pool, and we have a lot of time to go before we get to the actual draft there. So just something to think about with class strength. DRV asks, how can you find guys that fell in value due to a poor week 1 and 2 performance and would be a great buy candidate at cost? And then Saint said, any young players we should be selling high on right now that you don't see continuing to produce at the current level. So kind of back, opposite sides of the same coin. one way to find guys to buy is to look at usage. So we talked about Chris Olave. He has the usage, 22 targets in 2 games. He doesn't have the production yet. Travis Hunter, this one's more debatable. I think he has the usage for the most part. He had really good targets per out run, or he has really good targets per out run. He played a full-time role in week 1. There was some weirdness in week 2. I think better days ahead for Hunter, and I think he's probably being valued below where he should be because of that. Same deal with the rookies too. I think a lot of the rookies, good buys at cost because of the underperformance. But yeah, I mean, I think if you're looking for like a universal rule of how to figure these guys out, it's just going and looking at who's actually getting a high target share, who is getting, like who's getting, schemed touches, who's getting the valuable touches, like in a backfield, who's going to get the goal line and the passing game work. And then maybe were there teams that had really tough schedules the first 2 weeks that could maybe open up and be better? I'm trying to think I can't think off the top of my head who that might be. Maybe the Chargers with Hampton, maybe the Raiders run defense is maybe a little better than they were originally given credit for. And it was just 2 really tough matchups for Hampton. I know he has some easy ones coming up. So that's what I'm doing. That's kind of how I put my content together. As far as guys to sell high on that I don't see producing at the same level, I do really think Emeka Egbuka is a guy you should be shopping in your leagues, just because some people are crazy. Now, I'm kind of frustrated because in my leagues, it doesn't seem like anybody's really falling for the Emeka Egbuka hysteria, but it is happening out there. The guy has scored 3 touchdowns in 2 games. His peripheral numbers have not been that strong. I think they're totally fine for a rookie in his first 2 games, but he's not coming out and like smashing from the jump. He's not like tearing up the box score like some people might lead you to believe just because he's caught some passes in the end zone. His target share is not that high. His targets per out run is not that high. His yards per out run is not that high. I think he's going to keep getting better, probably. I still think he's a good player. He's ranked very highly, but I think some people are over their skis. And then Garrett Wilson, this would have been easier to do after week 1, but Garrett Wilson, just a victim of his offense. Again, he has a really high target share, but the usage is still not that strong. I love how they put this in the underdog, like stats versus film. They talk about usage at the position. It's basically like expected points, but like Garrett Wilson, his usage is like wide receiver 28 or 29. So even though he has an insanely high target share, there's just so little volume that it doesn't matter that much. So Garrett Wilson to me is still a sell. Marvin Harrison to me is a sell. Other players that have gotten off to a hot start, though, like those 2 guys have had kind of a mixed start. As far as who's had a hot start that maybe is not sustainable, let me see if I'm just going to pull up the data suite real quick and just kind of look at who's leading the position. Like Wan'Dale Robinson, is a top 10 fantasy wide receiver. I don't think anybody's really buying that. I think Rome Odunze, a tiny bit. If people are really buying this 20 points per game thing, I don't think that's even close to what he's going to actually settle in to be. So it kind of depends on how high of a sell you can do here. This isn't me trying to double down on Rome not being good. He's obviously good, but there are people that had really high priors on him, and they're going to see these first 2 games as confirmation of those priors. He's probably a guy worth shopping at least to see if you can like jump a tier. Quentin Johnson is a good one. I don't know how much people are buying that. I guess in some leagues they probably are. He's still the 3rd option, guys, on this team. He's going to have his big games, but he's also going to have a lot of dud games, I think. Nobody else. I think Dalton Kincaid is still kind of fraudy. I don't know. I struggle. It's really hard. Dalton Kincaid is running 56.5% of the routes this year. And I know that we make the excuse for Brock Bowers that he's getting like the work. he's being put out there in tactical spots where they want to use him. And I guess that's what's happening with Kincaid. But still, just a 15.8% target share. He's not Brock Bowers. Like he still has a lower, much lower involvement, and he's not half the player that Bowers is. So I don't know. 13 receptions through 3 games. Again, 15 points, 8% target share. This isn't anything to go crazy over. He's efficient at 2.3 yards per out run. He has caught 2 touchdowns so far. I'm still selling high, personally, if that's an option. But yeah, that's probably all I would say as far as sell highs. Clanger says, general topic, how do you identify a rapidly appreciating rookie as a sell? Again, tough question because we have such a small sample of rookies. It feels like they're all very case by case, but I think Egbuka is an example of a guy whose general market perception has just surpassed what he's actually put on the field. And at that point, when you're talking about a guy being valued next to or near legitimate difference makers that we know for sure are fantasy studs, and he's just being priced as if he is one of those guys, even though he hasn't actually done it yet, I think that's pretty much when you're finding, an appreciating rookie is a sell. Other rookies that have really risen so far, none of them strike me as sells. I don't think Bishal Tutin looks like a sell. I don't think Tet or Tyler Warren look like sells because their underlying peripherals are incredible. If anything, their box score is, lagging behind the peripheral numbers. I don't think Fannin is a sell. I don't think Tutin's a sell. I don't think JCM is a sell. Maybe JCM could be a sell. I don't know. I think the market kind of cooled off after last week, and then people don't really know what to think. I'd have to see where he's sitting on Fantasy Calc. I'm reasonably excited, but at the same time, they're still going to use Jeremy McNichols an irritating amount. I don't know. Fantasy Calc has him pretty close to where I have him. I have him at 90. I have him at 101. They have him at 95, but we both have him at RB 24. So seems reasonable enough. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't think any of these rookies are really sells other than maybe Egbuka. And again, that's just because he's climbed so high. Not because he's done anything wrong, just because the market is overly excited. I think a good way to answer as well from Nico here, looking at range of outcomes for each rookie, if they are valued at or above their range of outcomes. Yeah, I mean, for sure. And that's kind of what we're seeing. It's not quite what we're seeing with Egbuka because I don't really want to put a limit on what his range of outcomes are. But as far as his most likely outcomes at this point, I think he's being valued at the high end of that. But yeah, if you feel like you can estimate a range of outcomes, if a rookie's already being valued close to the ceiling of their possible outcome and they haven't done it yet, I think just probability wise, it's just going to make more sense to cash out when given the opportunity. Sometimes you'll lose that bet, but if they're already being valued as if the bet has hit, you're not really foregoing that much by selling. Austin, who did you sell for a 27-2? JCM or somebody else? Okay, Nico asked about Tua. What are you doing with your Tua shares? I could be overreacting, but this feels like a case where it might be good to jump off the ship before it sinks, or the ship doesn't sink and he still starts all the games, assuming no injury. I guess if you could recall what you did with quarterbacks that could possibly get benched, did you sell early or end up taking the value loss when they got benched? A few of those players would be A-Rich, Bryce Young, Justin Fields, Will Levis, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, Kenny Pickett, Daniel Jones. For example, I'm considering liquidating my Tua shares for a random second if I can't get anything more. Yeah, this is a thoughtful question. I have pondered about moving Tua further down. I think last night's game was pretty rough to watch. He had some decent moments, but he had some really bad ones too. Um, it feels like McDaniel isn't really the problem right now. It's mostly Tua. So, yeah, I don't want to overreact, but I agree with your instinct of like trying to sell. I think maybe trying to work him into larger deals could make sense where like someone needs a quarterback, but you like make it worth their while by giving them something else that they might want. Maybe you can get like a first round pick if you send Tua with a player, package another like base second type of player with him and get a first. That's a decent idea. As far as these other guys, it's going to be hard for me to answer because I never really had much of like any of these players. I guess I had a few Will Levis. I never really had Mac Jones or Kenny Pickett, or I really never had any of these guys like when they got benched. I had a couple Richardson shares, and I didn't see the Richardson thing coming really. So the answer to that is I didn't do anything. And when he did get benched, I think I flipped one share directly for Geno Smith, and that ended up kind of working out. Or I mean, it did work out. It like worked out, and then he kind of gained value back, and then he lost his job again. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it would be totally reasonable to sell Tua for a future second if you're not using him right now. I think that's just a reasonable choice. Like it's a risk tolerance thing. He could totally start the whole season. I think he probably does start all of the season. I can't fathom a team just like willingly going to Zach Wilson. I don't think that's going to fix anybody's problems. And he also is on a really big contract. It's kind of similar to the Derek Carr thing where like if Derek Carr didn't retire, he was going to be the starter this year because they couldn't get out of it. I don't think they can get out of the contract for Tua. Now, maybe they'll find a way, but I think the fact that he's on the hook for so much money makes it more likely that he plays out the whole year. So, I don't know. I'm probably not quite there yet, where I would like rather wait and see if he can maybe put together 2 good games against bad defenses and then sell him at a peak. I wish I was selling him after the Patriots game. I feel like that would have been smart. Maybe people would have been more willing then, but yeah, it's tough. I guess looking at guys like Bryce, though, that got their jobs back, or like Daniel Jones got a fresh start somewhere else, there is still some bailout potential where teams need quarterbacks. And if you end up with a team that doesn't get one in the draft, like they just like, okay, Tua, come on down. We'll try it, we'll try it again. You can get bailed out in that sense. So I don't know. I don't think you have to totally freak out, but it is looking pretty rough. Last question is from Goldhorn, aka Alshon Stan. How do you decide when to do what I'm going to call fake panic selling? That is, you're selling low, but it's likely to get much, much worse. Fake panic selling. So, like, I think an example of a player who's falling, it's probably going to get worse, would be like Mark Andrews or Evan Ingram. Also, maybe, Pacheco. Yeah, I think it's like you don't want to catch a falling knife a lot of the time. So when you're talking about an older player or like a less secure player that is having a rough patch and you don't really have any reason to believe it's going to get better, that player is now kind of a falling knife where odds are it's probably just going to keep falling. And so when I identify that, that's where I'm going to try to sell low. And I've tried to sell low actually on some Engram and some Andrews, and I've actually really struggled. So maybe the market's just being smarter with those guys and kind of recognizing that it's probably over. But I did it with Njoku after week 1. I did the fake sell low. What I like to do is find a player that is sort of potentially an ascending asset, but hasn't caught on. And then you try to you try to make this sort of like two ships passing in the night type of trade. So like the one I showed in the video this week, I traded in Njoku for Jawan Johnson and a third. Now, Jawan Johnson's like probably more valuable. I mean, in my rankings, yes, but in the market, even probably more valuable than Njoku. So I was able to identify, okay, Njoku's trending down, Jawan is trending up. I'm going to get a third thrown in on my side as like a little bit of insurance if I can, and made that move. So that's kind of what I would try to do. You know, somebody like a Wan'Dale Robinson, where people don't really know what to do with him. Again, it didn't work for me, but like you could try to send away an Evan Ingram for Wan'Dale Robinson, or I mean, he's out this week, so I don't think anybody wants him at this point, or a Mark Andrews or something. Is Jaylen Warren for QJ and a 2027 second too much in an 8-man super flex? So you'd be giving up QJ and a 2027 second. I mean, I think this feels harsh. I feel like Quentin Johnson has almost no value in an 8-man league because, like, are you really contending if he's one of your 8 best players? Like, I understand he scored like 20 points per game so far, but knowing what his role is and what we should expect from him week to week, I just don't know if a Quentin Johnston type of player even has any utility in an 8-man league, because by the time you have a team good enough to contend, you probably have a more reliable option to play. So I don't know. I don't know if it's really too much to pay for Jaylen Warren, where I feel like QJ is almost a throw-in that format. I guess the question would be what your league mates value QJ as, because like if you could send him for a second, I wouldn't trade 2 seconds for Jaylen Warren in this format. So I think it kind of depends what you can do with Johnston otherwise. But if your league mates are kind of aware that his value is fake, then it's like you're just kind of stuck with him forever. And I don't think it would be terrible to do this type of move. Now, is Jaylen Warren the type of running back that's going to get you over the top in an 8-man league? I don't know. To be perfectly candid, I don't play in any 8-man leagues. My smallest starting lineup leagues are 9, and I think I only have 2 of those. But in 8-man, it's like you basically just need stars. You just need like superstar players, as many as you can get. So if it's like you have a really stacked lineup and you're ready to make a push and you just need a better RB2, I understand this type of a move. I think it's reasonable enough. We're going to close out here with Goldhorn. I think he's talking about selling some shares of Jefferson. Previous message, if Jefferson gets a bounce off of a good game from Wentz. I don't think it would be crazy to sell Jefferson at a peak. Like, he's obviously incredible, and I don't think there's any type of concern that he's going to suffer a major value decrease. So I think if you're selling him, it needs to be for another player in that scarce tier. But yeah, I mean, I think if you can move down to an Amon-Ra or even a CeeDee Lamb, if that's, I don't know if that's a move you can make anymore, but if you could move down to a Lamb or an Amon-Ra and get any type of a decent plus on top, or you can even go down a little bit further to like Brian Thomas, get a big plus on top, or you can add a little bit and get Malik Neighbors, add a little bit and get Jamar Chase. I think all of those are reasonable moves with Jefferson, because there is some risk with McCarthy. I think he'll probably get better, figure it out. And I think if not, like KOC will figure it out. I think that guy's job is really safe. And I think as long as he's there, the offense is going to, mostly be good. But yeah, I think you have some options. You could also look at Bowers. You could also look at like McBride plus. So I think there's ways you can do it. If you're trying to go into kind of a 1-year rebuild, maybe McMillan or Warren with a big plus makes sense too. So I don't think it's crazy to do that. All right, guys, I went a little over an hour, but I did get to all the questions, threw out some buys. We did the panic meter. So this has been good. My plan for content next week, we're going to do the recap on Monday. I'm going to keep trying to tinker with that format. I'm going to try to do it on StreamYard and not have my mic muted. And I'll see what I can do as far as graphics on here and see if it's better or worse than what I was doing. I'd like to get some of my friends in the industry come on for some appearances throughout the year, get some fresh voices in here. But video next week is going to be about rebuilding, because I know it's like crunch time as far as deciding to rebuild, how to do the rebuild, whatever. I just got to get in the lab and kind of write down some thoughts, strategize a bit, make it concise, all that good stuff. But we're going to figure it out. We're going to get that video done. And then from there, I don't know. We'll see where the wind takes us. But Rock, I will try to type those up and throw them in the chat. But you can also you can also go back and watch the beginning part of the stream. I talked about the rookie running backs too, so it might be worth watching. But I should have no issue copying and pasting my list into the channel. Appreciate you guys hanging out. Hope we all have a great week 3. Hope we win all our matchups, and I'm sure that I will see you guys tilting and victory lapping in the Discord. So I'll talk to you soon. I don't know how to. Oh, I do know how to stop this. Okay, perfect. I don't have like an outro screen or anything set up, so this is it. See you later.